What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL playoffs, Saturday games, final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay, guys, NFL playoffs. Let's take a look at this two-game Saturday-only slate. So at the quarterback position, I actually like all the quarterbacks on this slate. You got Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Trevor Lawrence, and Daniel Jones. I'll play all of these guys. Trevor Lawrence, 26 fantasy points last week. Daniel Jones, 31 fantasy points last week. You got Jalen Hurts, who's got monster upside. Patrick Mahomes in a good matchup, and he's got monster upside. So I think you can pick any of these quarterbacks and build a lineup. So I like all these QBs here tonight. So let's take a look at the running back position. The stud on the slate is Saquon Barkley from the New York Giants playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a good defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Saquon Barkley has averaged 18.5 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 18.4 rush attempts per game and 4.8 pass targets per game. Been on the field for 80% of the snaps. Going to be about 28% owned. Projected at 22.7 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's $7,900 DraftKings salary, $600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Giants trailing by 8. So Saquon Barkley scored 28 fantasy points last game. He had 9 rush attempts and 6 pass targets, so only 15 touches, but he put up 28 fantasy points, so that's encouraging. If he can get over 20 touches here tonight, even if they fall behind, they will involve him in the passing game. He's clearly their best player on offense, so they will force feed him the ball no matter what the scenario is here. So I like Saquon Barkley here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, another running back that I like is Travis Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 9th worst defense overall, middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Travis Etienne has averaged 13.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.9 rush attempts per game, 2.7 pass targets per game. But remember, he was backing up James Robinson for the first part of the season, so his touch count is near 20 touches a game recently. He got 21 touches last week, scored 16 fantasy points. He's going to be about 47% owned, so the highest owned running back on the slate, projected at 14.5 fantasy points. He's $6,400 DraftKings salary, $400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 9.5. So Travis Etienne has scored 16, 5, and 26 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 27 and 9 rush attempts on top of 1, 2, and 3 pass targets. Now, I am concerned a little bit that the Kansas City Chiefs get a 2-touchdown lead and they have to throw the ball for the whole game. But I do think he'll get 20 plus touches in this one. It's a pretty good matchup. So I like Travis Etienne here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, another running back that I like is Miles Sanders from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Miles Sanders has averaged 13.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 15.2 rush attempts per game and 1.5 pass target per game. He's going to be about 19% owned, projected at 12.6 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's $5,700 DraftKings salary, $1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas think there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Eagles favored by 8. So this could be a nice running game script in a good matchup for Miles Sanders. Now, he hasn't done much the last 3 games. He scored 3, 6, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 11, 12, and 21 rush attempts on top of 1, 0, and 1 pass target. But I do like the game script and I like the matchup. I'm guessing, his ownership is pretty low because of his poor performance the past 3 weeks. Salary's down, so he could be a big surprise this week. So I like Miles Sanders here versus the New York Giants. Okay, so let's take a look at the wide receiver position. A couple of wide receivers that I like for the Philadelphia Eagles. I like A.J. Brown playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Okay, guys, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Otis Owens. Congratulations, Otis Owens. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
A.J. Brown has averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.6 pass targets per game. Been on the field for 86% of the snaps. Gonna be about 16% owned. Projected at 18.7 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's $7,600 DraftKings salary, $700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 8. A.J. Brown has scored 14, 20, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 10, 9, and 8 pass targets. So I like A.J. Brown here versus the New York Giants. Now I also like Devonta Smith from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the New York Giants. Devonta Smith has averaged 15.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8 pass targets per game. He's going to be on the field for 91% of the snaps, only going to be about 13% owned. I think this could be a sleeper pick here. He was really good throughout the season with a pretty high ceiling. So he's projected at 15 fantasy points. He's $7,200 DraftKings salary, $200 more on FanDuel. Devonta Smith scored 14, 24, and 34 fantasy points in his last 3 games off of 8, 13, and 12 pass targets. Been on the field for 91% of the snaps. So I like Devonta Smith here versus the New York Giants. Okay, coming down in salary here, probably one of my favorite wide receivers on the slate is Christian Kirk from the Jacksonville Jaguars, playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 9th worst defense overall, give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Christian Kirk has averaged 14.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.8 pass targets per game. and he's been on the field for 88% of the snaps. Going to be about 34% owned, projected at 16 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 9.5. So this could be a good passing game script in a high-scoring game and a good matchup for Christian Kirk, who scored 22, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 14, 8, and 3 pass targets. So you saw last week when they needed to score points, they went to Christian Kirk. 14 pass targets last week, 22 fantasy points. I'm expecting a heavy workload here again. So I like Christian Kirk here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, for the Kansas City Chiefs, I like Juju Smith-Schuster. Bit of a dice roll here. You could call him a sleeper pick. But he's averaging 12.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.3 pass targets per game. Only going to be about 18% owned. He's projected at 11.9 fantasy points here this week. He's 5,100 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. So we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Chiefs favored by 9.5. So Juju Smith-Schuster now hasn't done much the past 3 weeks. He scored 6, 4, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 2, 3, and 4 pass targets. But he is averaging 6.3 pass targets per game on the season. So I'm expecting him to get at least 6 pass targets here in this playoff game. He's got a low price tag and low ownership. And if the Jacksonville Jaguars can make this a fight, Juju Smith-Schuster could get a lot of work. Or, he could just catch a long touchdown pass and at a low salary. It's all he needs to hit value. So I like Juju Smith-Schuster here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now if you're looking for some value plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I like Zay Jones, who got 13 pass targets last week, scored 21 fantasy points. He's 4,700 DraftKings salary, going to be about 35% owned. So a lot of people like Zay Jones here. He's got a good matchup, a good passing game script in a high-scoring game, and 13 pass targets last week. That looks pretty good. Now, coming down in salary a little bit, take a look at Darius Slayton from the New York Giants. He's only 4,200 DraftKings salary. He scored 13 fantasy points last week off of 8 pass targets in 1 rush attempt. Another sleeper pick here, only going to be about 14% owned. So I like Darius Slayton. And this could be a passing game script, as Vegas thinks the Giants are going to be trailing by 8. So Darius Slayton could get a lot of pass targets at a low price tag and low ownership. So I like Darius Slayton here versus the Philadelphia Eagles. And the least expensive sleeper pick that I have for you here is Marvin Jones Jr. from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's averaged 7.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.1 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 18% owned, projected at 7.1 fantasy points this week. He's only 3,600 DraftKings salary. Okay, so at only 3,600 DraftKings salary, Marvin Jones scored 12, 5, and 12 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6,
6, and 7 pass targets. So he's got a great matchup, a fantastic game script here, passing game script in a high-scoring game. And if he can get 6 to 7 pass targets here and score a touchdown, he will certainly crush value, could find himself in the winning lineup. So I like Marvin Jones Jr. here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. You got the stud Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has averaged 19.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.9 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 80% of the snaps, going to be about 26% owned, projected at 20.4 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's 7,700 DraftKings salary. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Chiefs favored by 9.5. Travis Kelce has scored 10, 11, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 7, 10, and 8 pass targets. Now, they didn't need him much the past couple of games. He's still got pretty good volume all the way through the season. I am expecting a big performance from Travis Kelce here in the playoffs. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, another tight end that I like, although not many people like this pick, I like Dallas Goedert from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the New York Giants, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Dallas Goedert has averaged 12.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 89% of the snaps, going to be about 17% owned, projected at 12.3 fantasy points here on Saturday. He's 4,500 DraftKings salary, and we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 48.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles favored by 8. Dallas Goedert has scored 11, 8, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 7, 6, and 3 pass targets. So I like Dallas Goedert here versus the New York Giants. And I think the reason that Dallas Goedert's ownership is low is because for $200 less, you could play Evan Ingram from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Evan Ingram has averaged 10.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 77% of the snaps, going to be about 38% owned, projected at 19.5 fantasy points here this week. I think that projection is a little bit too high. I'm going to bump that down to 15 fantasy points. He's 4,300 DraftKings salary, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars trailing by 9.5. Now, Evan Ingram scored 22, 7, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 11, 4, and 2 pass targets. So a monster week last week, 11 pass targets, scored 22 fantasy points. But I do think that his ownership is a little bit high here, because if you look at the average fantasy points per game on the season, Dallas Goedert is at 12.1 fantasy points per game on the season at 5.8 pass targets per game. And Evan Ingram only averaging 10.8 fantasy points per game on the season on the same 5.8 pass targets per game. And Dallas Goedert has just as good as matchup as Evan Ingram at much lower ownership at about the same price tag. So I like all 3 of these tight ends, but I am favoring Dallas Goedert for tournaments. But I like Evan Ingram here versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com.
You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.